A couple months ago, Nintendo finally added Game Boy and Game Boy Advance to their Nintendo Switch Online service. But there's still one thing missing. Every other console they've added to this service has also gotten its own original controller, so you can play those games how they were meant to be played. And I know the Game Boy was the console and the controller, but I want to play it how it was meant to be played, dang it. So I'll do it myself. You can now play Nintendo Switch Online with a Game Boy. My plan for this was incredibly simple. Buy a tiny Switch controller, rip it apart, and throw it into a Game Boy. Bing bang boom, you have a wireless Game Boy controller. And I really wish it went that easy for me. That's exactly what I tried. I opened it up and started digging around for some test pads. But unfortunately, I couldn't find any labeled on this board. So I took the plunge and scraped up some traces because even more annoying was I couldn't just solder wires to the golden contacts due to whatever this black coating is. I wired everything up to this board for my good friend Natalie the Nerd. What it does is it allows me to press the buttons on the Game Boy and the controller does all the rest of the work. It's really cool and she sells them on her website if you ever need one for a project like this. But once everything was connected, I grabbed my Switch, and to my surprise, it connected instantly. Even though I knew it was simple, with my luck, I figured I'd have a lot more trouble. Oh wait, never mind. Only start works for some reason. That's because this controller does not share a common ground. So start was the only button that was grounded, and all the buttons need ground to work. A positive and a negative connecting completes the circuit and makes the button be pressed. But even when I tried connecting all the negative lines, it still didn't work. At this point, I had already destroyed this controller, so I thought I'd get a little wild. I've seen a lot of people sand off the solder mask on boards to get a clean scan, so I thought maybe I'm just not getting a good connection with my solder. Maybe I should sand it down and the solder will adhere better. It's not like I could bring this back to its original state anyways, so I went ahead and sanded her down. Soldering was so much easier. Even grounding all the buttons was a cakewalk. Yet start was still the only one that worked, and now it won't even connect to my Switch. I didn't really expect this to work because once the sandpaper came out, I was just in desperation mode and didn't really know what I was doing. I'm not even sure if this is actually ground. I did some more research and found out that the V1 of this controller does share common ground, but there are still no test pads that I know of, and the V1 doesn't even work with the Switch. So off I went in search of another tiny controller for the Switch, which is incredibly hard when everyone talks about this thing. It owns the SEO on Tiny Switch Controller and any other synonym of tiny. I thought about using the NES or SNES Switch Online controllers, but those are just too big even if I could get it to work. Eventually, I took a chance on the Nexilux Pro Mini controller, and while it's definitely bigger than the other one, it actually has some test pads. Now all I have to do is solder to all of those, and it works. Even with the DMG's massive size, it's not quite fitting in. Thankfully, I can just trim some unnecessary corners off with my flush cutters and keep on keeping on. Originally, I was just going to have a USB-C cable always plugged in for charging and store the rest of the cable in the cart slot, which did totally fit by the way. But I wasn't really digging the look of it, and who knows how long the cable would have lasted being that bent. And since the power switch would have just been for looks anyway, I decided to sneak a USB-C port in there for easy charging. It was the perfect size. And of course, what would a Game Boy be without its power LED? So I soldered a red LED to the Player 1 indicator so I can actually know when this thing is charging and connected. But obviously I can't just do the original Game Boy. I need one for the GBA too. I am pretty worried that it's not going to fit, but we'll worry about that later. That's Future Jake's problem. Oh wait, I'm Future Jake. Let's make sure this works. The unfortunate part of this is that Natalie doesn't have any boards for me to use with the GBA, so I'm gonna have to use a real GBA motherboard. I have plenty of donor boards lying around, which is perfect because I'll probably have to cut this board up to make room. But let's test it before we get out the Dremel. And just as I suspected, it works. After removing all of the unnecessary components, it's still too big to fit. So if you're the squeamish type, you might want to look away now. I already knew I was going to get some hate for cutting up a Game Boy Advance motherboard like that, but now you guys are really going to hate me. I f***ed it. You see, right here, I cut the traces for the D-pad clean off. Oh, you thought I broke the GBA motherboard? No. Wait, I did break that too. but I fixed it, don't worry. See, when I made this cut here, I was grounding left, down, and up on the D-pad because I messed with these little guys here. To fix it, I just removed what was left of those chips and then sanded it down until I could use all those buttons again. Once I knew what it was a pretty simple fix. But as far as this guy's concerned, he's dead. So after I got enough B-roll of the DMG, it was gutted to make this guy. If this video does well, I'll end up making the DMG whole again. That's not very whole. There we go. And since I was terrified of making the same mistake again, I ended up just cutting the shell to make room for the new old controller board. And it fits so perfectly that I can use the original controller's USB-C port out of the cart slot. It just looks a little messier from that angle. I know you're probably thinking that the buttons in the battery compartment are weird, but hear me out. The triggers and bumpers and the home button can be very useful, but not necessary to have constantly available, so I stuck them in there to keep it as original looking as possible. I think it looks so much cleaner this way when the battery cover's on. These controllers play and feel just like the original consoles because they are the original consoles, just a lot lighter. I'm not sure how good the battery life is yet, but I assume it's the same as the Nexalux controller, so according to Amazon, 10 to 12 hours, but I just don't see that happening on a 300 milliamp hour battery. Thankfully, that's an easy swap if I need it, but I love how these turned out. They match the consoles and the NSO icons, they have accessible USB-C ports for charging, and just the fact that they're wireless makes me so happy. In all honesty, I'll probably just use the GBA one since it's a bit more comfortable, and since the Game Boy Advance is backwards compatible, I feel like it's okay to just use this one. The DMG one will be a great display piece though. And don't worry, I still have plans for these chips in the remainder of the board, so don't get all bent out of shape over me cutting up a Game Boy. It wasn't the first time, and it definitely won't be the last. Not to toot my own horn too much, but these genuinely feel like they fit in the lineup. Again, they are mostly original parts, but that just proves that Nintendo could easily make a controller just like this if they really wanted to. And I think they would have even worse stock issues than with the N64 controller. But they won't do that, and that's why the sweatshirt exists. You can now buy one of my Nintendo Don't sweatshirts from my website, retroremaster.com. I'm still having issues with the t-shirt, but the sweatshirts are fantastic. It's genuinely so soft and so warm, I wear it constantly. But if Nintendo won't make these, hopefully AliExpress will do a better job than they did with Shank's GameCube Joy-Cons. So what do you guys think? It's pretty cool, huh? Let me know if you're going to attempt this in the comments down below. Or better yet, join the Discord and you can show it off to everyone. Of course, if you're new here, please subscribe. If you made it this far, you'll definitely like the rest of my content. So like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Later, guys. I fricked it. You thought I was gonna swear, didn't you? Come on, guys. You should know by now. I don't swear on this channel. My baby niece is almost 2 years old. She can't be hearing that shit.